The January wind howled against the window panes of my kitchen, a lonely, high-pitched whistle that usually made me feel snug and protected. But today, the warmth of my home felt thin, like a blanket worn through from too many washings. I sat at my heavy oak table, the same one where David used to do his long division while I snapped green beans, and I looked at the steam rising from my coffee. The heater hummed its familiar tune, a low mechanical thrum that had been the heartbeat of this house since Arthur and I moved in 40 years ago. Outside, the Michigan landscape was a study in grayscale: white snow, gray sky, black skeletons of oak trees. I have always loved the winters here. There is a certain honesty in the cold. It strips everything down to its essence. You see the true shape of the trees when the leaves are gone, and you see the true strength of a house when the blizzard hits. I never realized that the same could be said for people. I never realized that a long, hard winter could finally reveal the true shape of my own son's heart. David was my only child. When Arthur died 5 years ago, David held my hand at the funeral and told me I'd never have to worry about a thing. He was a successful man, or so I thought. He wore suits that cost more than my first car and drove a sleek European SUV that looked out of place in my gravel driveway. He and Sarah lived in a world of granite countertops, private school tuitions, and club memberships. I was proud of them. I truly was. I saw their lifestyle as a testament to the hard work Arthur and I had poured into David's education. We didn't have much, but we gave him everything. We were the soil, and he was the flower. But lately the flower had been looking a bit wilted, and I didn't understand why. Every time they visited, the air felt tight. Sarah would walk through my kitchen and run a finger along the molding, eyes darting around as if she were appraising an antique shop rather than visiting a home. David would sit on the sofa, his leg bouncing nervously, talking about interest rates and the crushing cost of living. I'd offer them coffee, I'd bake the lemon bars David loved, and I'd try to talk about the simple things: the church bake sale, the neighbor's new puppy, the way the cardinals looked against the snow. But they weren't listening. They were waiting for me to stop talking so they could steer the conversation back to the burden of maintaining a large property. The incident happened on a Tuesday. I hadn't seen them in 2 weeks, and I'd grown worried. I'd made a double batch of my cinnamon rolls, the ones that make the whole house smell like a hug, and decided to drop them off. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be the mother who eases the burden, not the one who adds to it. When I arrived at their house, the driveway hadn't been plowed. It was a mess of slush and ice. I parked at the curb and hiked up the walk, my old boots crunching loudly. I used my spare key and stepped into the mudroom, smelling the scent of expensive candles and floor wax. I heard their voices coming from the kitchen, sharp, jagged sounds that cut through the silence of the house. "We're underwater, David," Sarah was saying. Her voice wasn't the sweet, performative one she used at Christmas. It was cold. "The second mortgage is due, and the country club is threatening to pull our membership. Do you have any idea how that looks? We need a cash infusion, and we need it now." "I know," David groaned, "but what am I supposed to do? My commissions are down. Everyone is holding on to their money." "Your mother isn't holding on to hers," Sarah snapped. "She's sitting on a gold mine. That house, that land, it's worth nearly $1 million in this market, and she's just rattling around in it, keeping the heat at 75 and buying birdseed. It's selfish, David. She's had her life. Why is she even still alive, just hoarding assets we could be using to save our family?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I waited for my son to defend me. I waited for him to say, "Sarah, that's my mother you're talking about." I waited for him to remind her that I had paid for their wedding, their first down payment, and their daughter's braces. Instead, David spoke in a low, defeated mumble. "I know. I'll talk to her this weekend. I'll tell her the stairs are getting dangerous. I'll suggest that luxury senior living place over in Troy. If we get her to sign the power of attorney, we can list the house by March. We just have to make her think she's failing. A few comments about her memory, a few worries about her driving. She'll fold. She always does what's best for me." I felt a coldness start at the tips of my toes and move up to my throat. It wasn't the cold of the Michigan winter. It was the cold of a grave. My own son was planning to gaslight me, to steal the roof from over my head so he could keep his country club membership. To them, I wasn't mom or grandma anymore. I was a hoarded asset. I was an obstacle to a cash infusion. I didn't go into the kitchen. I didn't scream. I stood there in the mudroom, the warm bag of cinnamon rolls in my hand, and I felt a strange, quiet clarity. For years I had been the one providing the warmth. I had been the one making sure everyone else was fed and happy, even if it meant I sat in the drafty chair so they could have the one by the fire. But as I stood in their expensive, hollow house, I realized that you cannot warm people who have hearts made of ice. I walked back out to my car. I drove home through the gray afternoon, the heater rattling in my old Buick. When I got inside my house, I didn't take off my coat. I sat at my table and looked at the kitchen. I saw the marks on the wall where David had grown from a toddler to a man. I saw the chair where Arthur had sat every morning for 4 decades. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was a library of my life's work. And my son wanted to burn the library down to stay warm for 1 winter. I realized then that I had been complicit in this. I had raised him to believe that his needs were the only needs that mattered. I had shielded him from the consequences of his own choices for so long that he had lost the ability to feel empathy for the person who gave him life. "No more," I whispered to the empty room. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Harold. He'd been Arthur's friend for years. He picked up on the second ring. "Harold," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need to make some changes, not just to the will but to the deed of the house. I want to talk about a life estate, and I want to talk about a charitable donation." Over the next few days, I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I didn't cry. I didn't call David to argue. I went to the grocery run like usual. I went to church on Sunday and sang the hymns with a little more spirit, and I watched the weather reports. I felt like a general preparing for a quiet, dignified battle. The following Saturday, David and Sarah arrived. They were extra nice. David brought me a bouquet of supermarket flowers that were already drooping, and Sarah actually hugged me. "Mom," David said as we sat down in the living room, "we've been so worried about you. This winter is so harsh, and the driveway. We were thinking, maybe it's time to look at some other options, somewhere you don't have to worry about the pipes freezing or the stairs." Sarah leaned in, her eyes wide with fake concern. "We found this lovely place, Evelyn. It's like a hotel. You'd have bridge and movies, and you wouldn't have to deal with all this clutter." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had asked why I was even still alive. Then I looked at my son, who was nodding along, waiting for me to fold. "You're right," I said. "This house is a lot of work." I saw the flash of triumph in David's eyes. He leaned forward, sensing that Kaz H infusion was within reach. "Exactly. We can help you pack. We can handle the sale of the house so you don't have to deal with the stress. We'll just need you to sign a few things so we can move quickly." "Oh, I've already moved quickly," I said, taking a sip of my tea. I placed a folder on the coffee table. "I realized that you were right, David. I shouldn't be here alone, so I've made some arrangements." David opened the folder. His face went from expectant to confused, then to a sickly shade of pale. "What is this, a conservation easement? A land trust?" "I've deeded the property to the county land trust," I explained calmly. "It's a beautiful gift, really. The woods will never be developed. The house will become a local nature center and historical site after I pass. In exchange, I have a life estate. I stay here for free as the resident curator for as long as I live. The county handles the taxes, the insurance, and the major repairs. It's a huge weight off my shoulders." Sarah's jaw literally dropped. "But the equity, the money from the sale. David, you said, 'The money?' I asked, tilting my head. "Well, there won't be any money from the house, dear. It belongs to the public now, but it's for the best, isn't it? You were so worried about my safety and the burden of the property. Now that burden is gone, and since I won't have those expenses anymore, I've decided to take that savings I've been holding for emergencies and go on a cruise with the ladies from the bridge club. We're leaving in February. I need some sun." David looked like he'd been struck. "Mom, we have bills. We were counting on, we thought you'd want to help us." "Help you?" I stood up, smoothing my apron. "David, I have spent 74 years helping people. I have spent 30 years helping you specifically. But I realized something this week. A mother's job isn't just to give, it's to teach. And clearly, I forgot to teach you how to be a man who stands on his own 2 feet. If I gave you this house, I'd be failing you one last time. I'd be teaching you that you can use people you love as currency." I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold air rushed in, clean and sharp. "I think you should go now," I said. "The roads are going to get icy soon, and I'd hate for you to have an accident in that expensive car." They left without another word. Sarah was fuming, and David looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He looked like a little boy who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, only to find the jar was empty. I closed the door and locked it. I went back to the kitchen and sat down. The heater hummed. The coffee was still warm. I felt a weight lift off my heart that I hadn't even known I was carrying. I wasn't just an asset. I wasn't a museum. I was Evelyn, and I was very much alive. I picked up my pen to finish the letter I had started. I had one more thing to say to my son, a truth that had been 40 years in the making. I wrote, "Dear David, the hardest part of winter isn't the cold outside. It's realizing how much wood you've burned trying to keep the wrong people warm." I set the pen down and looked out at the snow. I didn't know if he would ever call again, or if our relationship could ever survive the truth. But as I watched a red cardinal land on the bird feeder, I realized that for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting for the spring. I was perfectly content right here in the cold, knowing that I finally knew exactly where I stood. I picked up the phone to call the travel agent. I had a cruise to book, and for the first time in my life, I was buying a ticket for only one. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the snow in shades of violet and gold, I realized that the silence of the house didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like freedom. And as I turned off the kitchen light, I whispered to the shadows, "I'm still here, Arthur, and I'm doing just fine." But as I reached for my coat to go for my evening walk, I saw something in the driveway that made my heart stop. A familiar battered truck I hadn't seen in years, idling at the gate with the headlights cutting through the dark,